Good evening, and thanks for joining us. It's Tuesday night. We're back with another topic and another conversation, open and right from the heart. So if you're here and you're watching live, thanks for joining. And we are, as always, looking forward to questions, comments. You can use your chat box. No, sorry, yeah, the chat box for that. Tonight, the title is not meant to be clickbait, but I don't necessarily want to talk in depth about the real definition of the imposter syndrome, but kind of use that more of a springboard with something that is, I think, relevant, but maybe a little bit more common, or maybe not. I don't know. Well, sometimes I have ideas in my mind that get unkinked in these podcasts, which is fun. So I was a number of things led me to this topic, but it made me these thoughts made me think about the issue of imposter syndrome. Simply put, the imposter syndrome is basically somebody who's capable, skilled, and accomplished, and they're in positions that they have either pursued or have been kind of just the flow of their achievements, and they're in these positions, but they don't feel like they're qualified to be there. They feel like frauds, basically, which is why the word imposter is used. They feel essentially out of place. And it's interesting to look at the origin of that term. The original term is actually imposter. It's called the imposter phenomenon because it's not actually. Maybe that's different now, but I don't think it's a recognized mental health issue as much as just a psychological phenomenon that people face, and apparently is sort of common among people. It's common being very relative, obviously. Talking about millions of people that are in positions, but the thing that I wanted to talk more about is the idea of people being in positions they're successful in their positions. They're successful from the standpoint they're making money, they're recognition, whatever. They're doing well in this position, but in the same vein of feeling like an imposter, feel like maybe this isn't really what they were meant to do, and so they're doing something that isn't fulfilling. And these thoughts were flowing in my mind, and then I saw an interview with between Charlie Kirk and they were like, it was him and another guy doing, I don't know whose podcast it was. I don't think it was Charlie Kirk's podcast, but he was surrounded by like 7 or 8 women, and all these women are apparently porn actresses, stars, whatever. And he said he posed a question to him. He said, if each one of you had an opportunity right now, and essentially you could wave a magic wand, and you could have your career, or you're making tons of money, and you're doing what you do, or you could be a mother and a wife in a healthy family. Which would you choose? And without exception, every single one of these, like 6 to 8 women, said, I would choose a healthy family.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me because these women they're promoting, they're fighting, they're actually defending. This whole reason they're on this thing.
Yeah.
But deep down, they don't want to be doing that.
Yeah.
They would rather be doing what the movement that this term imposter syndrome was birthed out of, which is a wave of feminism at the time, was actually somewhat against. And there's many different personalities in the whole feminist movement, but during this time in the 70s, this was pulled from 150 high-achieving women who were in positions, had pursued those positions, many of them having set aside or postponed the idea of being a mom and a wife, and had chosen these careers. And out of 150 of these women, a high number of them talked about this feeling of either inadequacy or feeling out of place, or feeling like they just got lucky. And so then you start looking into some of the studies done, which I've done a little bit of research in, statistics that of women that had achieved. Now, by the way, this is not specific to women. I just want to make that a clarifier right in the beginning, because since then, imposter syndrome has been declared gender neutral. That's the actual term. But how many people, it's interesting to me, how many of these women specifically had very successful careers. They did these surveys on a lot of these women, and like 76% of them had said, we put off being a mother on purpose. We, or being a wife, and we put off the idea of having a family on purpose. And out of 78% of these women, I think it was like 37% of them either struggled to have kids or couldn't have kids. And so a time period had passed. They pursued one thing, and the pursuit or the investment in what, like I said, would be called the traditional lifestyle had been neglected, and for many of them lost.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of reading that you can do to look into this phenomenon that I'm more referring to, in addition to the imposter syndrome. But the word, which doesn't really make a great title, is existential inauthenticity, which is why it's not the title. So Richard Leader, he's a career theorist. I don't really know what that is, but that's what he is.
A what?
A career theorist.
Oh, okay.
He calls this success without fulfillment. Viktor Frankl, who's a very famous psychologist and wrote a few books, lived through the a Nazi internment camp, called this the feeling of inner emptiness when achievements lack personal meaning or connection to one's purpose. So, all that to ask this question or questions about how do you get to a place in life where you are both successful, good at what you do, and fulfilled, right? So that's the big question. But to try and break that down, let's just talk first about the desire to be successful. Where does that come from?
The desire to be successful?
Yes. The desire to achieve, the desire to excel, progress.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's inbuilt. It's honestly, I've wrestled with this. When I first started pastoring, I was in my 30s, and I thought that this was something that was in everybody. And then I was in England, and with this idea. So it was more in my 20s that I had this idea, but when I started pastoring in England, I ran into people that didn't have that. They didn't have any real desire to be anything. They just wanted to play. And so I started to say that maybe it's not in everybody. Maybe this is something that is there in some people, but not there in other people, And then as time went on, especially later years of being a pastor and have, gained a lot of experience, I kind of go back to my original thought that it is in everybody, but for some people it dies. The idea of wanting to be something dies, and I think that probably the better way of describing it is they've just lost hope in the idea of being something. And so there are people who they really don't expect anything from life, and they've lost that idea.
Let me interject a question there. Why? How? Well, I guess why is the right question. Why do? What do you think leads to that question?
The loss of hope.
Loss of hope. Yeah. Sorry.
Experience. I think it's experience. For many people, it's. I think they're in a family situation that doesn't have any regard for education, and so they drop out of school, and then they realize, when you start to try to enter into the workforce, how important at least having a high school degree. It's almost the kind of baseline. If you don't have a high school degree, then you're kind of disqualified from a lot of jobs right away. But also, I think just that idea, really is the main thing that they've not developed any kind of skill. They're not really good at anything. They haven't tried to be good at anything. It's so mostly, I would say, I think it's environmental. It's an
So growing up,
environmental
you're
thing.
talking about like
Growing up
lacking,
and not
lacking training, lacking
direction.
yeah,
Those kinds of
the
things.
implementation of values and stuff like that.
All that is a it plays into the loss of hope, because you get to a certain age where you begin to realize the things that you should have that you don't have, and how much work it's going to take to get to the point to where you have that. Seems like it might be forever, or too late. So you're going to be, you have to develop these things, and so, or go back to school or whatever, and so it's going to be forever, and so people kind of just, I think, just get to a place where they just think, there's what's the point, what's the point of trying to put any effort into it, because I'm never going to be any more than I am already. Because they're looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, I go back to school, I get out of school, I'm going to be this age. I'm still starting at square one, at this age, where other people are probably starting, 10 years earlier. So I'm always going to be 10 years behind. So what's the point? So I think that's a lot of the lost hope, is the idea of, from where I can't get where I need to be from where I am now. And I can't go back and change where I am now.
So is achieving limited to, I was going to say education, but really training is the idea.
Well,
More
it's funny that because it's not really that there are people that don't have the desire to achieve. I think everybody has the desire to achieve. I'm kind of not answering the question properly, because I'm kind of answering it from the standpoint of the idea of really achieving. There are people who they'll they want to achieve. That's their kind of purpose in life. But then there are other people that just want to be seen as achievers. And so, that, which is kind of the rest of the people that are not achievers. They want to be seen as achievers. And so they deal with it other ways. What's the easiest way to get, some kind of recognition? And so they take the easy road. They realize, I can't do it this way because I don't have the education, I don't have the skill set, I don't have this. And so something that comes natural to them, they'll try to capitalize on and try to embellish isn't probably the exact right word, but to try to puff it up, and make it look like more than it really is, and they usually, people like that, they talk like they're an authority, about the thing, because this is the thing they've done all their lives. It's or they've been around, and it's, so they try to make it sound like, that they've actually put work into becoming this, and so it's a fabrication of a achievement. Where it's not really achievement. It's something that they like doing. They've been doing it for a long time. They've picked up information along the way, and just try to present that as being something. That's, I would say that's probably the best way to describe that, is that, they've and then there's this other. So we could probably say there's three groups, and say that the third group is the one that's just lost hope and they just party. They're going to just take the path of least resistance, and just do the easy thing.
So it's interesting that because you talk about, you're kind of alluding to an age issue, like this is something.
Well,
later
there's definitely a moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a moment where realization,
Mm-hmm.
sets in.
Okay, so thinking about this from the standpoint of having like a late start, we'll just call it a late start, right? And we right before the podcast, you and I were talking about fitness goals, and you're in your 60s, I'm in my 30s, so there's an age gap, obviously, in my goals, and your goals differ relative to that age gap.
Yeah.
And so now let's try and like apply that to the person that is looking at their life going, I've just, you know, failed
Yeah,
up to
yeah,
this point, and
yeah,
now I'm so far along in life that the idea of going back to school and, or, you know, learning a trade or doing something that's going to send me in a direction to be successful almost seems unrealistic. How do you apply that concept? Because what you were talking about in your own
yeah.
fitness goals are a lot more short term but more consistent, we could say.
Yeah. So when you're getting older, you're losing, and it's inevitable. You know, when you're 20 years old, 30 years old, you are in denial of the reality of what your future holds. I know, even as level headed as I've tried to be, you know, hitting you know, my 60s and realizing, wow, there really are there are things you can't do. You know, you just can't do it anymore. I remember, you know, I've mentioned it before to you. You know, playing with your kids, my grandkids, and you know, trying to show off by walking on my hands, which is something that I've been able to do all my life. You know, and then in my 50s, you know, when I started, you know, training and really working out and really getting myself in shape, then I could do, you know, standing push-ups, you know, handstand push-ups, and so over the next 10 years, I'm not working out, but I'm you know, just letting things kind of take their course and just staying healthy. And then I go to do a handstand, and then the whole world starts spinning, you know, and I'm like, wow, you know, it's I can't keep my balance, and so I couldn't do a handstand because I couldn't keep my balance, even trying to ignore the spinning, you know, and just, you know, close my eyes and try to stay in a handstand. I just couldn't do it, and it was like, wow, you know, what when did that happen? You know, I didn't even know that had happened, but that's a classical age related thing, is to lose balance. You know, you have changes in your your balance. And so, you know, 63-year-old, or at that time was like 61, I think, and you know, doing handstands is not number one, it's not something I had done in many years, and number two, it was something that I hadn't realized had decayed, you know, and that would take effort now, you know, to recover, and I could, you know, I'm not saying that I can't recover it, but this happened without me doing anything. It just happened to me. And it wasn't because I was lacking in exercise or lacking in mobility, or you know, neglecting. It wasn't an issue of neglecting. It was an issue of aging, and recognizing that you have to put more effort into things as you get older, and realizing, you know, there was kind of a wake up in some ways, is that I'm going to have to put more effort the older I get into trying to maintain what I already have. You know, it wasn't a thing of moving forward. When you're 30 years old, you're thinking about doing things, you know, achieving things that you've never achieved before. But when you're in your 60s, you're wanting to hold on to what you have already achieved. You know, it's a whole nother way of thinking, and so you have to be happy with you know, small progress, and that's true of people who've, you know, waited too long, you know, and they're not haven't gone to school, or haven't developed a skill. They're going to have to realize they're going to have to settle for small gains, you know, over time,
Mm.
and and because it's the only way that you will ever get to that place that you need to be. Because if you're working to achieve slow gains over time, eventually you're going to catch back up again, you know, or it'll be unessential, you know, it'll be unnecessary to try to achieve that. But you know, so I would say, anybody, you know, you're in your 20s or 30s, and you have you know, neglected stuff, and then, you know, all of a sudden you woke up one day and realized, wow, I'm a useless piece of dirt. You know, I don't have a skill set, I don't have education, and I'm not going to be able to get a job. That's probably going to be more in your 20s than your 30s. I mean, by your 30s, if you're only coming to that conclusion, you probably haven't been looking for a job. But but when you're in your 20s, you know, and okay, so you're doing all the silly, you know, entry level kinds of positions, and you're trying to move forward, and you realize, wow, you know, people don't, you know, I give them my resume of working at, you know, a million fast food places and shopping, you know, stores, you know, and then you want to, you know, do something that requires a skill, and now all of a sudden it's like, wow, you know, I don't have that, you know, I don't have it. You're going to have to realize that you're going to have to be happy with slow gains, because you don't, you're not gonna just go take a crash course in life, you know, and 6 months later you're going to be caught back up again. It doesn't. That's not how it works.
So, do you think that like, do you think that we overthink the issue of achieving? And what I mean by that is, so you're talking about like, you know, getting to a point where it seems too far. Like, you know, it's okay. There's no point going back to school. It's like it's too much, too far to go that route now. Like, neglecting the smaller, more achievable goals. I actually expressed, you know, again back to what we were talking about before the podcast. So like the way you described your goals, you know, I respect and value that level of goal setting, because it's, to me, that seems like a requirement in order to get to bigger goals for me, you know, like, so, you know, just a little bit of context here. My personal goals, I have like it's called the three major lifts: bench press,
Mm-hmm.
deadlift, squat.
Yeah.
And so I have set goals for myself in every one of those lifts, and all the lifts I do, or all the workouts I do that surround those lifts, are in support of building those other ones up. And so I have all these smaller goals with the other exercises that are trying to promote the strength in those other bigger lifts.
Yeah.
And so I have like these bigger, well, we'll just say, you know, singular goals, whereas your goals, like I said, they're broader, and they're more consistent. So how do you get to a place where you're able to process small goals in order to get to a big goal in the first place, when you've already essentially lost time on that? Like, you know.
Yeah. Well, that again goes back to that idea of you know, it's a fantasy to think that, you know, somebody who's 20 years old is going to, you know, say join, you know, Pony League baseball, you know, for example, or even farm team, you know, for professional, whatever. And they're going to get, you know, they're going to walk up to the plate and they're going to, you know, knock it out of the park. You know, I just need to keep swinging for the fence. I'm going to knock this out, because you don't have the skill set, you know, to be able to do that. Get a base hit, you know, and you make contact with the ball. You know, the more you make contact with the ball, the more you're going to be able to hit a home run. You know, but you're not going to hit a home run if you don't know how to make contact with the ball. You're just going to swing and, you know, cool down the pitcher. You know, you're not going to do anything, you know, other than be a fan. You know, and so you have to have small goals in order to achieve larger goals. In my case, there's no larger goal well, there is a larger goal in you know, being 60 years old and going in the garage. No, stay out of the hospital. That's a big goal.
Yeah.
You know, I had to go today to have a top up on a vaccination, and I'm sitting in there and I'm looking at these people walking in, and I thought, God, there's a lot of sick people here. It's like I'm in a hospital. It's like a lot of sick people here, and it's like, I don't want to be one of those, you know. I don't want to be one of those people that comes in, you know, they haven't combed their hair, you know, and they're shuffling in, and they've got, you know, got their pajamas on, you know.
They look sick.
Yeah, they look sick. Yeah, they are sick, and they look sick. And I'm looking at this, and I think, you know, I don't want to be that, you know. I don't want to be. And the truth was these were people that were younger than me as well. I mean, they weren't even. It wasn't like they were, you know, they were they were older than me. These are people who are younger than me, and I'm looking at this and thinking, I just, I don't want to get there. I walk by, there's a guy, he's sitting out in the front. He's an older guy. He was sitting out in the front, kind of staring off into space. He didn't look very healthy, and he's got a newspaper in his hand, and he's just kind of looking around, and his hair's a mess and everything. And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, there's got to be a way to avoid this. This can't be the destiny of every person, to have to sit on a bench in front of the hospital and die slowly. And so that's that's a big goal, to stay out of there, because it seems to be very common. It's the place where people end up when they hit their 70s and 80s, and so, yeah, that's a big goal. And so, for me, thinking about, I'm never gonna, because you mentioned the idea of hitting a landmark bench or whatever. It's like, no matter what I do right now, it's going to be less than what I could do at 30 years old. It's just all there is to it. I'm never going to surpass the fitness of a 30-year-old. It's just not going to happen. It's just not a reality. I will be able to surpass the fitness of a 30-year-old who sits on the couch eating potato chips all day, and watching TV. But
Potato
I'm not.
chips are good carbs.
But I'm not gonna. I'm not, and I'll barely pass. What they can do. Because it's just the reality of things. But I think that's an important factor. Is reality. Living in reality. If you've lost opportunities along the way, you don't have to just give up on life altogether, but you do have to, set your sights a little lower, and aim for something. Don't just, oh well, there's no point. Why should I even bother? Because now I'm never gonna be able to be top dog. It's like, okay, well, you're never gonna be top dog, but it's better than being no dog. And so it's a, you have to live in reality. It's important.
Okay. So let's go in the direction I wanted to take us, kind of in the first place. We're just talking generally about achieving and the desire to achieve, setting goals, and I don't think there's anybody that would listen to this podcast and say, yeah, no, it's stupid. You don't need to have goals. You don't need a desire to achieve.
Yeah.
Like, I think in our heads, it's easy to acknowledge the importance of that and the value of it. But there have been, many times, I've even said it myself in street preaching and witnessing to people, is that, every person has an emptiness without God.
Yeah.
That there's something missing when you don't have a relationship with God.
The God-shaped hole.
God-shaped hole. I actually recently read a paragraph that had that quote, and it was the origin of that quote. I cannot remember it. I didn't save it in my notes, but I just came across it because I was looking some other stuff up. But really, how true is that in the context of genuine fulfillment?
Yeah, see, this is, it's something that's been, on my thinking for quite a while, especially in the last few 3-4 weeks, maybe a little longer, is this whole idea. Yeah, there is we do have a God-shaped hole. God created us with a need for Him. That's given, but we fill it with other things, and we don't do a bad job. Not everybody is, I'm putting this in there and just nothing's working. It's not everybody's there. Not everybody's like that. And I can speak from personal experience, having lived, the first 21 years of my life with zero. Well, not quite zero, but let's say, 1 out of 100, 1%. I don't know. I wouldn't even go that far, but just a small token of Christian understanding, and God understanding. I never felt any obligation to go to church. My parents never made me go to church. I was invited to go to church with friends when I was in my teen years. And I went, and it didn't do anything for me. It didn't touch me in any way. I didn't feel that I had some need for God. And I even got baptized at a Christian camp, and the only reason I did that was because I knew the popularity factor would kick in, and everybody'd be all excited about the fact that we got baptized, and I was using that to my own personal advantage, so that I could be the flavor of the month at the camp, because I was one of the new people to get baptized. And but in all of that, there's never a time in my life where I felt that I had some lack in my life. I did say there must be more to life than what I'm experiencing. That is a fact. But it was never from the standpoint that I felt like I was missing something from God. It was never a thing where I felt like, I need to get a hold of God somehow. And when my friend began to share with me about Jesus, it was irritating to me. It was annoying. There was nothing attractive about it to me. It was, but he was very persistent, and I was very kind. It's the only way I can describe it. And let him carry on and say all this stuff. And I would argue. Sometimes I'd get so irritated, so annoyed, I'd fire off something to make him shut up, and then he would come back. He would retort with something, that would stop me in my tracks, because it was like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And it was like, that's made me sound stupid, and because he knew what he was talking about. But I never felt like I had some God-shaped hole in my heart. I never felt like I needed God. I never felt like there was some necessity. In fact, when I actually gave my life to Jesus was because I had seen what appeared to be a reality of God in a congregation of people that was a congregation that he of the church that he attended. And it was more out of intrigue, out of curiosity, that, okay, if this is real, and they gave me some sort of instruction as to how this works. But at the same time, I said, you know what, God, if you're real, make yourself real to me. And I'm not religious. I know if you're real, and if I were to die right now, I would go to hell. And it wasn't. I didn't even have a fear of that. It wasn't a fear thing. It was just I was just expressing the facts. Is that this is just the way things were. And so in asking Jesus to come into my life was purely experimental, just like I was experimental with drugs. When I take LSD, it was the same kind of experimentation. It was the same kind of idea. I'm going to take this and see what happens. And I took LSD, and I took mushrooms, and I tried pot. That was the first drug. I'm saying all this out of order. But I tried astral projection. There's a lot of things that I tried, to see if they were real, to see if there was anything on the other side of these things. And there wasn't. But that didn't destroy my curiosity to where I'm just going to live my life in a box. I was open to trying things, and this wasn't something anybody was pushing on me. I just thought I would try it. And lo and behold, I end up getting saved, and Jesus makes himself real to me, changes my life. I'm transformed. I have no desire for drinking and smoking and partying and anything like that anymore. I don't want to do any of those kinds of things. And it was the first real experience that I had, that I could that had a, this is what you do this, and this is what will happen, kind of a thing. That was the first time. I mean, even taking LSD was a letdown. Taking mushrooms was a letdown. I had more bad trips than good trips, because I was wanting to have these kinds of experiences that people would say. So I would overdose on purpose because the previous doses didn't do it. So I would just overdose, and then I would have these horrible bad trips, but I still wouldn't experience the things that I was trying to experience. It's like I'm going to die from overdosing on this stuff before I ever get to the point to where I have these kinds of, experiences that people are telling me about. And so I came to the conclusion that the people that were telling me about this were just weak-minded, and anything would have, tripped their trigger. And that perhaps maybe I just was more sound, mentally sound. I don't know how to describe it exactly. But so when it came to Christianity and getting saved and having that transformation, it was like, it blew me away. It was like, wow, this is the first thing that's ever done that. That other things had effects. I'm not saying they didn't have effects. I'm saying they just weren't as earth-shattering as they were reported to be. But this was, and it was everything that it was reported to be. And so for me, it was like, wow, this is amazing. But again, I never felt, and nothing led up to this of any kind of a God-shaped hole or some kind of, feeling that I was missing something. I felt like I was missing something from life, but not spiritually. It wasn't that I felt that there was something out there, something meaningful, something with purpose, something that's going to make me, I just felt like life was just too boring. I mean, it was just too predictably boring for me. And it was like, there's got to be more than just, predictable boredom.
Okay, so you answered yes. And I guess the question then is, so again, going back to kind of the question of fulfillment, can you be fulfilled without God?
Okay, so here, this idea of being fulfilled to me is a big pile of rubbish, because it's.
How about let me ask you for the definition.
Well, there's a reason why that's important.
What is no? I want you to define it. Define what people mean when they say fulfilled, and then tell me kind of what is the misunderstanding.
Okay, well, I won't say what people mean. I'll say what the word means, and then we'll take it from there. The idea of being fulfilled is the idea of reaching some sort of place where you're satisfied with, where you are, that there's this sense of I've accomplished, I've arrived, I've found meaning and purpose, in my life, and everything's cool. There's no such place. There's just no such place. That idea is so selfish and self-centered, to think from that standpoint that somehow life's going to bring you a bowl of cherries and you're just going to be happy as can be. It just, it's not reality. Even as a Christian, because it isn't about that, and that's another thing. There's so many things about Christianity that I learned after I became a Christian and realized this is why I didn't want to become a Christian, is all this nonsense, and pleasantly surprised to find out it's not Christianity either. It's what people think Christianity is, because they've just made it up in their own heads. It's not, or it's been passed down through religious tradition, from other people. But it's not biblical by any stretch of the imagination. There's no, you won't find anywhere, the Bible challenging us to fulfillment. When Jesus says, I came that they might have life and they might have it more abundantly, he's making a comparison between the life you have now and the life you can have in Christ. And it is abundant life, but it's not fulfillment. Fulfillment isn't going to happen until I'm in heaven. That's when I'm going to experience fulfillment. I'm not going to experience fulfillment on the earth. I wasn't meant to. None of us were. We weren't meant to experience fulfillment on the earth. We were meant to experience salvation and the hope of a future fulfillment in salvation, because the Bible talks about it. So the Bible uses language like down payment, that's the idea. So fulfillment, let's say fulfillment is the buying of a house. Well, we are just receiving, we just have a down payment. We just put the down payment down. It's not ours yet. We're not moved in yet. The deal's not closed yet, but we were able to put that down, so we have a certainty now that this is all going to go through. There's no bids going to come in and take the house away from you. It's just a matter of paying it off. And so finishing off, being able to pay it off so that you can actually live there. I'm not the entire payoff, but just all the
Right.
closing costs and everything. And so that's what Christianity is. Christianity is you put down a down payment and then you spend the rest of your life covering the closing costs, and then you move in. Then you're fulfilled. So this idea is just so, like I said, it's so self-centered. To think that if you do anything in this life, all of a sudden you're just gonna, I'm so fulfilled. Life is so wonderful. And so amazing. And the funny thing is, I hear Christians testifying and saying these kinds of things, and I think you're a liar. Because they're people I know. Christianity is the best thing I've ever done in my life, and Christianity will be the best thing you've ever done in your life, is really the statement. And I think, no, that's not true. Christianity is not going to be the best thing they've ever done in their life. Going to Disneyland will be better than that. Going on vacation is going to be better than that, because it's not that kind of a thing. Christianity isn't about exciting emotional fulfillment. It's reality. The fact I'm not going to die and be buried and dropped in the ground and cease to exist. That in and of itself, that whole idea, no matter what life brings you, it's going to end when you die, and it's over, it's finished. And so to me, it's like, I'm fulfilled, and then you have a heart attack and die. That's who cares, that you think that this is fulfillment, because the truth of the matter is, just, you think you're fulfilled right now, just give it a week. Give it a week. You won't be fulfilled. Something will happen. Something in life will sideswipe you. Some issue will come up. Something. And the truth is, this is why a lot of people stop. They deconvert. Because they're bitter. They think they finally caught the golden ring, and they realize that it's not a golden ring. It's made of plastic, and it doesn't last. And they go, forget this, I serve God if I'm not going to be fulfilled, I'm going to find some other way to be fulfilled, and so a lot of, there's a lot of people, they miss the truth about what it means to know God and have a relationship with God. It's for the next life. It's not for this life. This life is I could say a lot of things about what this life is, but it wouldn't do justice, because this life is really more about being prepared for the next life. That's really what it is all about. It's the preparation for what's to come. And so it's, the idea, talking about fulfillment and those kinds of things it's just not part. It's you got pieces from the wrong puzzle.
Okay, so there's a question that come in, and then we'll keep going
right.
in this direction a bit, because we're still talking about the idea of achieving, but we're kind of bringing in other elements here. So the question online is ambition, drive, determination. However it's looked at, are these things genetic somehow? I've seen kids take after their parents in these ways.
Okay, so there is a genetic factor in the mix. I was trying to think of a way of more qualifying it, but I can't really. There is a factor there, but it's not the deciding factor. I think more what's being referred to there is really more about natural talent. I always, like, for example, I look at, I look at different families and their kids, and their kids have, inclinations towards things. Like, we've got a couple, your son and another young boy in church that have shown some real potential in music, you know, at 3 years old. And and they you can see, there's something there, listening to them at 3 years old play the drums, because they're kind of tracking each other in drums and guitars and stuff,
Yeah.
and listening and thinking, wow, they've got an ear, they've got some rhythm, and I'm listening and I'm thinking, who's that playing? It's like they have as good of a rhythm at 3 years old as some 20-year-olds that I've heard get on the drums, and I think, is that so and so practicing? Because I know that there are people that are wanting to learn how to play the drums, and then I'll look out and realize it's Caleb or Jabez, and I'm like, wow, gosh, they were keeping a beat for a period of time.
Yeah.
They made it 5-10 seconds. Rhythm, and they know that it's a rhythm, and all that. So there's that factor, that's there, and that will naturally make kids want to achieve. There'll be a momentum there because they've got some kind of gifting, and if they grow up in a family that encourages that, then it'll have opportunity for expression, and it'll seem like ambition. It's not really ambition as much as it's just they found something they like doing. It's exciting to them, and so it motivates them to want to practice and do things. So there is that factor that's there, but like I said, it's not the deciding factor. But you will have kids that are like their parents, and that's not a genetic thing. It's that this has been passed down, through teaching, training. That their parents have learned the art of parenting. How to parent without. One of my favorite. Because so there's an old saying that truth is more caught than taught, and so I like to throw truth around. Rather than teach truth. There are people, they make a big mistake because they think that, by telling people how things are supposed to be done, that this is going to inspire people and they're going to learn. But it's better to throw truth, in the direction and let them catch it, because that is far more motivating, to catch truth. You're getting a revelation, of things. You're learning stuff, or you have these moments where the light bulb comes on and you realize, wow, that works with this and that works with that. And I know in my own life, my dad was like that with me, and he would say, don't worry if you don't understand what I'm saying. One day you're just going to wake up and you're going to go, I remember what my dad said, and truth, will fall into place. And so, and that's exactly what happened. I remember the day, that first time that ever happened. I was 17 years old. I was in an electronics class, and I had my electronics book open, and I was reading about transistors, and and he had taught me about that several years before, but it was not something that I'd actually grasped. And then I was reading the article about transistors, and it was like, my dad taught me this, and all the, like I said, all the puzzle pieces just fell into place, and that was exciting to me. That was like, wow, that's cool. I want that more. And so the desire to want to learn, was awakened.
Mm-hmm.
And so because my dad would throw truth at me, not try to teach it to me, and so those factors are there.
Yeah.
They do work in that way. As you do have a genetic component there, but that's more for natural talent and things like that. But then there's also the training as well, which is important. And then the third thing, which is important as well in all of this, is the understanding that you don't. If you can, especially as a Christian, if you can. If you can get past all the negativity, all the negative thoughts about yourself and who you are and what you've missed and all that kind of stuff, you have a great opportunity to grow, and because it's more about running in your own lane, and God moving you into a place of where you're useful to the planet. It's not. I read books like this all the time. I'm reading a book now. Forgot the title of it.
The Idea Factory.
Huh?
The
The
Idea
Idea
Factory.
Factory. You remember. The Idea Factory and about Bell Labs. And, you know, a lot of these guys, you know, they weren't, you know, they did go to school and stuff like that, but they were just smart guys. But a lot of the inventions, a lot of the things that were invented, all of a sudden, you know, they're in the shower, you know, and then, hey, I got a great idea, you know, and change the world, you know, with an idea that if you will just get over this idea that you don't have the you know, this or that or the other thing, you've missed these opportunities or whatever, and just become a learner, you know, just start gathering, you know, the raw materials, you know, not just gathering information and pretending that you know something, but gathering the raw materials of you know, so you have a good bedrock of learning, you know, just learning, then you can become something. And that's, you know, it's all this is why I will, you'll never hear me deconvert. Because this is all God stuff, you know. It's the way God created us in a way that's just absolutely amazing. You know, it is absolutely amazing the way we've been created. And when you learn how you work, you know, and the fact that you work a certain way, you know, then you can't help but understand that I was created, you know, because you don't work differently than anybody else. You are There are nuanced differences, but you are not different. You know, you're not night and day different, you know. And there are people that they actually believe they are psychotic, you know, and they need mental help because they have been deceived, you know. They're I don't know, you know, why people get this idea in their mind, but there are people that they actually believe that they're God's gift to humanity. They're special, you know. They've got some you know, superpower, you know, that nobody else has, you know, whatever, you know, all those other kind of things, you know. And I find it's just the opposite, you know, is that you want to be an achiever. You want to see your life achieve things. Take a lot of time to discover how a human person works and realize that that's all you are, is just a human person. But that's the good news. That's all anybody else is as well, is a human person. So when you see somebody doing something amazing, you're seeing something that you have the potential to be able to do, but you don't have the raw materials in order to make that come to be. So you have to gather the materials together, you know. And it's not just surfing the internet and learning trivia facts, you know. It's not, that won't do it, you know. You have to have the real raw materials of learning, the real understanding of who we are, why God created us, why we're on this planet. You know, we're here to serve, we're here to love, we're here to help other people. You know, that's the reason why we're here. And if you're developing a skill set that can do that, well, it won't be long before you're amazing. It's just simply the way it works. But if you refuse to develop those things and you go for, I want people to think of me this way, not only will you not be amazing, people will have opinions about you that you will wish you never knew. Because when they're together with other people, so and so, like, oh man, you know, I'm afraid they're going to kill somebody one day. You know, they're so psychopathic because they're just, you know, so out there, so different from the rest of humanity. So, you know, they're on their own trajectory, and nobody knows where that, you know, what it's pointed towards. You know, it could be prison. You know, for you know, those are the kinds of people that, you know, that end up being, you know, mass murderers and stuff like that. You know, it's they just, you know, the delusions of you know, there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is. I can't remember, but they just, you know, it's just a delusion of grandeur. You know, there's you know, they're going to leave their mark on the world. You know, and everybody's going to remember them.
Self-aggrandizement. So, this is probably my last question, but in the context of this scripture. So, the question is, how does the desire to achieve differ between you know, I really need to know what to say when I say Christians. Because every time I say Christians, we have to clarify, and so there's like
Yeah.
this clarifying statement that has to be made ahead of time. I can't even really say real Christians.
Yeah, either real Christians. I would define it as genuine Christians and religious Christians.
Okay.
That's the way I would probably.
Okay,
say
so
the best
I'm
way.
going to because I'm gonna categorize. I'm gonna lump the religious Christians in with everybody else.
Okay,
That's
that's
not
fine.
a real Christian.
Yeah.
So 2 categories. We're going to
Okay.
stick to those 2 categories
Okay.
with this question. How does the desire to achieve differ between those 2 groups? And the scripture that I was thinking
So
about
real genuine Christians
real-
and everybody else.
Everybody else,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Philippians 3:13, brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. So, this is Paul writing. Paul is, arguably he is one of the most effective, genuine Christians in history.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And so, him saying this, he's a high achiever. You could say he's a high achieving, genuine Christian.
Yeah. And he gives us a secret in that scripture.
Okay, so that's the question.
Yeah.
What is the
Well, he gives us a secret. Number one, your effectiveness is not found in your past. And that's a very, very critical element because.
both positive and negative?
Sorry.
Both positive and negative, or just positive, like the positive things in your past, or the negative?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, everything. There's no. Yeah, your past is your past, and your past can. It can enhance your present, but it isn't the deciding factor of your future. And that's what Paul's saying: forgetting those things which are behind and pressing forward, to the prize of the high calling. Because when he says that, he's talking about success. He's talking about forgetting his past success.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was a success in his past.
Yeah.
In his field. As a Pharisee, he was a Pharisee among Pharisees. He was zealous for the law. He was as far as the defender of the faith, he persecuted Christians. So he has a sterling resume. In terms of his past, but he says, I forget all that. He says, I'm leaving all that behind, because that's not. Because your past isn't the deciding factor for your future. It can have an influence, but you need to leave it in the past. It is the past. There's a lot of factors in that, because another factor in forgetting the past in his case is that, like I said, the success of his past. And that, it's amazing to me how many people, they start hitting their 40s and the only success they have in their life was when they were in high school. And it's like, wow, are you just going to carry this all the way through the rest of your life? I remember when, and you're going to be one of those people that you're going to be in a room full of people that are talking about today and talking about achievements of today. And you're going to say, I remember when, way, way back in a time that nobody ever lived, that's in the conversation, and talk about irrelevance, foolish ideas, because you haven't done anything in the last 60 years of your life, and so it's tragic, but it's a reality, and people do that, so your past is your past. That's all there is to it. If your present is not pursuing a future, then you're in trouble, because that's what Paul says. I press towards the mark. And so he's using his present to move into the future, and it's amazing to me how many people are just they're trying to use their future to enhance their future, and they're not doing anything in their present. It's amazing to me just watching people, and years of their lives will go by and then nothing's changed, but they keep talking about, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And oh yeah, I need to, oh man, my job, it's a dead end job. I need to get a better job. And they never get a better job. They just keep working the same job. And it's, yeah, no, this job, it's not going to do it, man. I really need to get a new job. And it's like, Yeah, just because you put more emphasis on really, you've been saying that for the last 5 years. Who nobody believes you. Oh, I need to get out of this circumstance in my life. No, I know this is not. I need to do this, and they don't. And at times going by, and so they just, it's just the same old. They're not going anywhere. They're not growing. They're not achieving anything because they're not using their present. And that's the key. Paul says, you know what? Forget about my past success, but forget about my past failings. I have the present. What am I going to do today? What am I going to do right now to move into a future? And that has to be the case. If you're not going to do that, if you're not going to use your present to move into the future, your future's not going to be any different than it is right now. It's just not. You're not going to achieve anything, and so you have to. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what. And that's we were talking about earlier is my goals. I'm doing these workouts. They're exhaustive workouts. They're difficult, and I'm maxed out. I'm maxed out on my weights. I'm maxed out on the amount of reps that I want to do. I want to do so many. I want to do 8 reps at such a weight. It's such a thing, and I'm doing that. And then the next one, it's like, okay, you know what? I want to be able to do one more. And if I can do 9 reps, then the next one I go up a weight, and then make my way back up there again. And so it's just, or if it's a push-ups or pull-ups or whatever, is I'm going to do one more than I did the last time. And that's enough. It's enough because it tells my body I need to grow. I need to grow because I'm going to be doing one more pull-up or one more push-up and or one more sit-up or whatever it may be. I'm going to do one more. And so I'm going to need more strength for the next time because the next time I'm going to do one more again, and keep, when you keep doing that, you keep doing the one more, and that's called progress. Progress isn't, breaking the tape on the finish line. It's how did you run the race? How did you, how were you able to move forward? Because that really is the big difficulty for most people is just simply moving the ball forward, moving, hitting goals, and it's funny. People, they want to be more involved in things. It's true in church, people, I really want to be involved. So they're involved and then they fall apart. They fall apart. They get into conflicts with people, and they start, having more trials that come against their lives, And there's more, because the more you want to do, the more life opposes you, and so you're pushing. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this, and so you're hitting these oppositions because you don't have the raw materials. You don't have the raw materials, and so you're getting pounded. Because I'm gonna catch the kickoff and I'm gonna run it back for a touchdown, and you get clobbered. You should have just did 10 yards and went down, but now you're just going to get your butt kicked, get picked up and carried back 5 yards, and that's often what happens to people is because they don't want to put together the raw material that's necessary.
Okay, so I have a last question then, just kind of a follow up to that
Okay.
last part of your answer is that you because you mentioned this idea of you start to do something and then you hit these
Yeah.
walls or life opposes you, and so
Yeah.
so what is the key then? Because it seems like it doesn't matter who you are. If you're an achiever or if you're a novice in this, you're going to experience times like that. What do you do?
If you grab the ball and you see you've got a clear run for 10 yards, you run the 10 yards and then run out of bounds.
And every football fan knows exactly what that means.
And you gain 10 yards.
Yeah.
You gain 10 yards. That's all that matters. Oh yeah, but I really, really, really want to make a touchdown. It's like you gain 10 yards. Be happy with that. And then when you do that a lot, eventually you're going to make a touchdown. But that's that you have to It's again, it goes back to that idea. You have to deal with reality. You know, you just have to deal with reality. That's the facts. You have to deal with reality. You know, and you know, I doubt that there's a coach anywhere, you know, that wouldn't be happy with a player, you know, running for a first down, you know, uh, than rather than trying to, you know, uh, be Mr. Hot Dog and go for a touchdown and fumble, you know.
Yeah. See, my brain just takes out a million miles here. Okay, that's it for tonight. We appreciate you guys joining. If you're joining on YouTube, Instagram, we appreciate you guys taking the time tonight to watch this. If you're watching after the fact, thanks for checking us out. We hope you can join us live next week. We'll be here same time, same place, 7 o'clock. We encourage you to check out our YouTube page, our other events. We have a lot of stuff going on in the coming months, and so look forward to or look out for those things, those announcements and stuff. We'll put some information on your screen here in a minute with our weekly schedule. And so if you're in the area, we'd love to meet you. You can join us in person, our regular services and upcoming events. And otherwise, we will be here again next week. Thanks for joining.